Committee meeting. The first item on the agenda is the adoption of the minutes of this committee's meeting held Monday, January 25th. The recommendation is to approve those minutes.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item, please.
Next item 2 is a report of both the General Manager of Planning and Development and the General Manager of Strategic Initiatives. It concerns the King Edward Overpass and urban design considerations. We have an introduction from Maurice Gravel, who's our GM of Strategic Initiatives, followed by a presentation by Mr. Rob Innes, who's our Manager of Community Planning.
Good morning, Maurice. Or afternoon, actually, you're right. I'm just a little bit behind. We're looking forward to your presentation, so go ahead, please, Maurice.
Mr. Chairman, the purpose of this presentation today is to provide committee with a status update on the fit and finish of the King Edward Overpass. As you are aware, this is the province's bridge, and the city has the opportunity to enhance the visual appearance of the bridge over and above a typical Highways Department bridge structure. Mr. Innes will now provide a short slide presentation that outlines some of the concepts that are under consideration by representatives from the BD Group, staff, and the province's contractor, Kiewit. Upon completion of the presentation, I will provide some closing comments.
Thank you very much. Welcome, Mr. Innes.
Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I just have a small handful of slides that I just want to share with the committee this afternoon to give an idea of the work that we've done to date. And as Maurice had said, we're working with the Kiewit, which is the province's contractor on the project, as well as the BD Group and internal staff with engineering and planning. Just wanted to provide very briefly a bit of context in terms of the work that we've done, and put the King Edward Corridor in the context of two very important neighborhoods in the city. The new village at Fraser Mills community on the waterfront, that's the BD development, and then Fraser Mills, or Maillardville rather, and the King Edward Street connection to that historic neighborhood, and particularly the Mackin Park area. Ultimately, it's important for us that we've looked at this work as ultimately as one continuous corridor, right from Burnett Avenue, heading right down to the riverfront, and that's in the fullness of time as, say, the village of Fraser Mills gets developed, the work that we're doing in the overpass, and the work that the city is doing on the reconstruction of the King Edward Street, the Mackin Park segment. A couple of things that have guided the work that we've engaged in, going back to 2007, a recommendation from the Maillardville Task Force to Council was to encourage the province to establish the historic link between Fraser Mills and Maillardville, recognizing that King Edward Street was that historic road from the mill through the mill town up into Maillardville. And we've continued to have that resolution as one of our guiding considerations. The next one is the approved development agreement that Council adopted in November of 2008 between the city and the BD Group. And that development agreement laid out the developer's obligations in terms of servicing, and there's specific reference to an enhanced pedestrian and cyclist connection from United Boulevard through to Burnett Avenue. And that was to provide a safe, pleasant, and interesting experience for pedestrians and cyclists. There was also a financial contribution from the BD Group to the project, the overpass, as well as the reconstruction of a trail through Mackin Park along King Edward Street. And we've worked closely with the BD Group to make sure their interests have been reflected in the design. The third consideration was recognizing that it is a provincial project and recognizing that the cost parameters with these enhancements, as well as the timeline. We've been conscious of the province's timelines, construction timelines, and we've been working within that. This may look familiar. The next slide here is looking at the number of the design considerations that have been explored through the design process, mentioning the integration of this multi-use path, connecting Maillardville, Mackin Park, and ultimately the village of Fraser Mills. We've looked at opportunities in terms of the retaining walls and the textures of those retaining walls. Looked at decorative lighting, street lights and pedestrian lights on the overpass. Looking at the sidewalks, and as there been some special consideration for the sidewalk treatments. Street furniture, we've looked for opportunities for public art and interpretive signage on the as part of the project. The railings and guarded rails were seen as opportunities to move beyond the basic ministry standards. So you'll see that in a couple seconds of what's being proposed. And we've also looked at opportunities for landscaping and planting in and around the overpass. Just very briefly, the overpass itself is, in very simple terms, is going to have 2 travel lanes in both directions, a bike lane on either side, and then on the west side of the overpass is this 4-meter wide multi-use pathway, and that multi-use pathway has been the particular focus of our attention. This image gives an idea of the work that, what has been proposed to date.
Bike lanes.
Highlighting, again, showing the bike lanes on the overpass itself, and then the 4-meter multi-use pathway on the west side of the overpass. And this is a perspective looking south towards the river, and that's the Surrey skyline in the distance there. What this image is showing is the decorative street lighting and pedestrian lighting. We have drawn on the design guidelines from the Fraser Mills development for street lighting, some of the railing materials that are going to be used down in the Fraser Mills, pulling that across the overpass, and then having those same features being drawn up into the Mackin Park reconstruction and the trail along the east side of Mackin Park, and showing the banners here.
Rob?
Yeah.
We have Councillor Robinson would like that.
I just have a question. Are these the actual fixtures? Is this the design of the fixtures, or
This is the design of the fixtures that.
That's great. Yeah. Just wanted to know if this was the real thing or not. Thanks.
The other thing, I guess, just in terms of color, some detail there is that it's proposed that the light standards be painted black, and again, pulling in with the colors that have been used in Maillardville. The railing there and the guardrail is more of an industrial look than the standard ministry materials that have been used. Again, drawing on the design guidelines from Maillardville. They're going to be galvanized steel, but the railing on top will be a black, painted black, or it's proposed to be painted black.
Rob?
Yeah.
Just a question. When we talk about the railing, I'm just looking at this picture here. When we get to the crossing of the highways, is there going to be a higher railing fence to protect anybody from, dropping something over the edge? Or
this is, and I'll show you the next one. There's
okay.
There is a higher railing, what's called a railway cage, over the CPR tracks, but the railing itself is, and I'm going to look to my engineering colleagues in terms of the actual height of the railing. It's
5 feet.
About 5 feet. So it's a little. It's higher than normal. So it's recognizing in terms of from a bicycle's perspective as well. So you don't get that sense that you're going to tip over. So it's. But the railway cage there is a requirement for the CP rail in terms of over the tracks that protect their interests. What this image here is highlighting is at the crest of the overpass is proposed to have a small lookout. That would be an area where either pedestrians or cyclists could pull over and rest, make provisions for a bench, interpretive signage on at the outlook there. The other, just in terms of the surface treatment, the sidewalk treatment, you'll see that long band on the right-hand side. That is intended to be drawn right across the whole overpass, and it would be a different material. It could be some sort of stone or slate material. And we're working out some details to find out a cost-effective material for that. Similarly, there's what we're calling the crossbands, and it has Maillardville there written inscribed into the stonework there. The other side would have is proposed to have Fraser Mills, so it gives some sense of the sense of geography. What's being proposed here, and we recognize that there are, in terms of that lighting that's embedded into the sidewalk, that there are operational and some maintenance concerns for that, and we're still looking for other possible ways to give some highlight to that lookout area in terms of and making some use of lighting. This one. Again, we talked about the use of the retaining walls. This retaining wall here is on what we consider is the most visible retaining wall, the northwest corner of the overpass. So this would be if you looked on the Lougheed Highway side, on the Barnes-Wheaton site, looking south and east. So that's, again, looking at the opportunities for two things in terms of integration of public art, but also looking at, in terms of material, retaining walls, or the retaining walls that a material or texture that doesn't create a blank wall for graffiti. So what's being proposed is a highly textured retaining wall material, concrete material, similar to what we understand is what's being used on the Cape Horn curve on the Lougheed Highway. The public art piece this is showing a representation of what could be within the scope of this particular project. We will at least get to the point in terms of where we will have a design that the public art or some what have you metal fabrication could be added at a later date and could be the subject of a community project. But the public art itself, again, make provisions that it could be added, but not necessarily added as part of the construction project that we're working on right now.
Just a quick question to this picture here, and I guess it was on the roadway. You're looking at the bottom along where the art is. You have a concrete barrier, your typical road separating, which isn't the most attractive thing. Is there another type of barrier that I can understand why you want it there that would be more attractive? You might have a similar block or flat block that could go along there to achieve the same thing but be more attractive. Similarly, when on the last slide, when you look on the roadway there, you have just your regular road concrete barrier. Is there any way to look into making those more aesthetically pleasing?
So that one there. So the retaining.
That one there. That's good.
This one?
Good. That one there. Yeah. Same with on the other pictures. This barrier here and the one below. On
the bottom of the retaining wall. Yeah. Good questions. Again, from an engineering perspective, there may be some requirements there, but I think we can look at some options in terms of maybe a lower or more aesthetically pleasing. I think from a traffic operations perspective, trying to make sure that cars don't hit the retaining wall, but I agree in terms of maybe there's a more aesthetically pleasing concrete band or concrete curb.
I understand the reason for it being there, but there's more aesthetically pleasing. I have Councillor Reamer has a question, and Councillor Stewart. Mayor Stewart, I should say.
My question was on the next slide. Okay, so you're going to do something with the wall all along there. There was that letter from the Maillardville Residents Association who expressed concern with the two large walls that support either end of the structure. And I'm not sure if the wall on the very right-hand side there is the one he's referring to or not, but I would assume you would treat that wall the same as the other walls that you're treating with the special textured paint or the...
I think, it's a good question. The surface treatment, that concrete, that highly textured surface will be used it's intended to be used on all four corners.
Okay.
Where we're making these provisions for the public art or some metal fabrication is just on this portion of only on this leg of the overpass itself. The other ones are envisioned as being planted with some green climbing plants, making provisions for planting at the base of those. At this stage, we're seeing this one as being the most highly visible overpass for pedestrians, cyclists, and particularly from Mackin Park. The other ones over time will have buildings relatively close to them, but again, this is what's being proposed at this time.
Thank you. Mayor Stewart.
I had a similar question again on the previous slide.
Sure.
To Councillor Asmunsen's. Actually, that one's.
I didn't see
We go
that
one slide further.
Further back or further ahead?
Further back. One slide further back. Okay, so here you're anticipating that the bikes would be always on the roadway in the bike lane.
Could be in both.
And not, but okay, so there is that. This is being designed as a bike/pedestrian
Correct.
walkway on the sidewalk, if you will. I've been told and I've seen it myself, on a bike, that type of no-post barrier does tend to have the ability to clip the tire, and therefore the bike rider falls over.
Chips.
And because it's not vertical, it's actually wedge-shaped.
Yeah.
And so the shape of it isn't designed for bikes. It's designed to stop vehicles from crossing over, and it does it very well, and I understand why we use that one. But for bikes, my concern is coming at it from the other side. If you're a bike rider, you could bump into this thing with your tire and therefore fall over it into the lane of traffic from the sidewalk, or fall over and seriously injure yourself on the sidewalk if you're coming at it from the other direction. So I would prefer, as Councillor Asmundsen talked about, some element that is designed to be friendly to bikes as well as to the motor vehicles. Now, if we could go back forward the 2 slides again, please.
The next one?
And one more. When Council went on a tour of some of the infrastructure associated with the Canada Line in Richmond, some of the concrete elements were wrapped in vine trellis things.
The pillar, yeah.
The pillar, and we would end up with this green concrete instead, or rather full green planting instead of concrete. Almost impossible to tag from the graffiti point of view. And my concern here is how do we make sure that this doesn't become a maintenance headache for years to come? Have we contemplated ways to green up the wall perhaps in sections that aren't going to be public art? And I just leave that at staff level.
Yeah, good questions, and we'll take those away in terms of looking for a more bicycle or pedestrian-friendly, barriers and curbs. The greening of these retaining walls, said on the other 3 legs, that's what's intended. That it'll be that textured, but that be planted out so that those plants can grow up. On this side here, and it's from my understanding that because of the tightness, tightness of that slip lane, this would be standing, if you're standing on the corner of the Barnes Wheatons, there's a sidewalk, there's this slip lane. Against my understanding that it's really constrained, really too tight to get any planting strip there. But we'll look at.
So you're saying the distance between the sidewalk
and
the concrete wall
on the retaining wall side, there's no room to plant anything.
Got it. Well, I'll leave.
But there will be. We're proposing to have that planting on the other 3.
Well, that's great news, and I'll leave you with whatever we can do on this side.
The other thing is just sort of going back a bit in terms of when we started on this process, in the middle of last year. The idea of getting planting on top of the overpass was initially explored. The construction type of this overpass has precluded that in terms of not being able to provide planting wells and planting places on top of the overpass. So we haven't lost sight of that, but we've looked for opportunities to where we can to green the overpass, and we looked at the retaining walls as being an opportunity. The other idea is this is showing again in the fullness of time as these neighboring adjacent sites redevelop, is to have a coordinated planting scheme, on these adjacent sites that again give you a sense that there's been some planning and some coordination of that landscaping.
Yeah, on specific to the greening things, my apologies, Mr. Chair. Specific to the greening elements, we did almost dangle that in front of the residents and said, here's one of the possibilities. And then when it became impractical, I understand its impracticalities perhaps and the extra weight associated with it, but we're left with we dangled something in front of them and we pulled it out. And I wonder if there's consideration being given to hanging baskets or to smaller planting elements as we go along there, recognizing that they would be subject to the extremes of weather, deadly cold in winter and absolute overheating in summer, because they can't be tempered by the ground they sit on. So, but again, I'll leave that in staff's hands as to whether or not there's some green elements we can put on the overpass itself.
Thank you. Good comments. We have explored the idea of the hanging baskets and whether that makes sense and is appropriate on an overpass. But it's an idea that we can think about some more.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I'm very impressed with the look of the thing now, and I'm looking forward to it being open.
We always don't get everything we want, but we try. And so, Mr. McIntyre, you had a comment.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chair. And just on that point, we'd like to see a lot there, but we may not see some of these features right away. And just to be clear on that, this shows an opportunity to put some public art on one side of the overpass structure. The other areas, I think, as Rob was saying, we have discussed the possibility and the desire to green those up, to have those green walls where it's a structure apart from the abutments. But that would come in time. That would come as those sites develop, and we would interest those property owners and developers into providing that. These murals, some of the other public art opportunities on the structure itself would come in time. It's not included within this budget at this point.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. McIntyre. Councillor Robinson.
Yeah, I want to go back to the cycling slide of one more. Yes, this one. So I'm looking at, I'm trying to imagine cycling across this, and very few cyclists, I think, would choose to be between the barrier and the traffic. And so why isn't the barrier moved over to be the barrier between the traffic and the cycling lane?
Very good question.
And then the cycling lane is in with the pedestrian traffic, but on the other side of the light standards.
So the second part again?
So if the barrier is moved over and the cycling lane is between the light standards and the traffic barrier, that's where people cycle. And then the cycling traffic is not in with the traffic, the car traffic at all. Is there a particular engineering reason why we wouldn't do that?
I guess it's to provide choices in terms of if you're a commuter. I get from my understanding. I'll let. But
I think the commuters would still choose to go between, if it's as long as it's straight.
If they've got a straight line.
As long as it's a straight line, I don't think it matters. I'm just curious if there's a particular
Mark, is there
engineering reason for that.
Yeah, through the chair. So yeah, cyclists could be on either side of the barrier. I mean, I don't know if we've looked at that too closely. Normally, you think of the commuter cyclists as being more like cars than pedestrians. And so a lot of times they travel at, especially if it's a downgrade,
Breakneck speeds.
Well, they travel, 60 kilometers an hour or more on a downhill slope. So the idea really is to separate those kind of commuter cyclists from pedestrians, and that's why you see the barrier. If a cyclist wants to be more leisurely, they can certainly travel within the pedestrians, but I think that's probably the concept.
That's fine. I'd just be curious, hearing from the commuter cyclist community, what would it make more sense that they're between the lamp standard and the barrier? Or if we have the choice, if it doesn't matter from an engineering perspective, I'd be curious to hear from the commuter cyclist group. If we're not retrofitting here, we're starting from scratch. So,
Maurice?
To the chair, a lot of times on these major road facilities, and when you have multi-use pathways, you have people walking and they want to do a leisurely walk. They may have children with them and that, and so sometimes the children or the families could get scared because some of these are professional cyclists. They ride, as Mr. Zabornik said, they ride quite quickly. They can keep up with traffic. Some of them, they're called professional riders. And so they will choose to use this, the on-street network, because they can go and they don't have to worry about conflicts with children running out in front of them, those type of safety things. So this offers an opportunity for both recreational and your professional cyclists.
I'm not disputing that. I think I've ridden with those people and they really do go very fast. I'd like to hear from them if this, if this is what works for them, that's great. I don't know. It's just an opportunity. I also, will you show us a picture of what it will look like from the highway as people go under? Will we?
Unfortunately, I don't have one of those.
Well,
images.
only because I'm thinking this is, we've talked about entranceways and promoting Coquitlam, and here's an opportunity. There will be millions of people going under this overpass, and I want to know what they're going to see.
And I should have added this earlier in the presentation, is that the province will be using this overpass as well as a structure to put some of their highway signage on as well. So we've been constrained by that.
They're so ugly.
So I can't disagree.
But somewhat necessary.
I know that they're necessary. So I would like to make sure that, speaking of highway signs, that they actually say something about Coquitlam. When you're in Surrey, it says next exit to Burnaby, and it says nothing about Coquitlam. So if they're going to use it for signage, it needs to talk about us a little bit. So maybe we can.
Yeah.
Anyway,
we don't
whatever.
have much.
It is all about us.
Is that it?
Any
Okay,
other?
Rob, continue.
Just a couple more here. And this is just a sketch of, again, looking south, a rendering of the multi-use pathway, a little bit of a detail of the decorative lighting with the banner, and on the right-hand side is the railway cage over the railway tracks, and also in terms of how that will be constructed out beyond the overpass itself.
Rob, I guess my question through Mr. Gravel and the crew, when I look at the barrier here along the sidewalk, we talked about the shape of it. What about the height of it? Because when you're going to have a 4-meter wide path, when you want a pleasant walking experience, the protection for the pedestrian with heavy trucks that are going to be using this and cars of the road spray. So is this going to be just a little 2-foot thing that the wash will come over, or are we looking at something higher, or is there some other ways that we can add screening to that to protect the pedestrians from the road spray as they're walking across that pathway?
To the chair, we have a dedicated lane for the cyclists. So in terms of the spray, those professional cyclists that are on the road are probably going to get the majority of that spray.
But when they're not there, what I'm talking about strictly is the pedestrians in there. I drive big vehicles. You come out, you send up quite a large spray. This is coming out of an industrial area. Trucks areas coming in and out on those curb lanes most of the time. Mm-hmm. So I think what I'd like to see done is a height raising or some type of way of screening or planting. If you had that wall, you took it up and you had a hedging or something to make people want to walk, especially in the amount of rain that we get in the Lower Mainland, the volumes that we get it, that they're going to walk across and want to use it. They want to use it just not in a safe manner, but they want to use it in a pleasant manner. And to have big vehicles and stuff sending spray across, I think you need to do an analysis of how much barrier protection there that you need to help make that walkway pleasant.
Yes, to the chair, we can take a look at that. This proposal here, my understanding, they've been working for a number of months with Kiat before I arrived, but this was the proposal to have this type of no-post structure. And actually, the street lights that you see there are actually formed integral into that no-post. So these some spaces, they hand form, and then the street light base is formed and poured right in place into that integral unit. But certainly we can talk to the province and to Kiewit to see what we can do in this regard. This was their proposal, and
If you could do like a form, a box with some planting, hedging, planting, greening once again, different things to create a protection for the people that are, it may be just a higher wall cost-wise, but I just think you really have to maybe do an analysis of that, because I can guarantee that, the big trucks running across there, there's not going to be cyclists there all the time, and a young mother, her stroller, the kids walking across there, you want to be able to minimize. And we get, 200 and some odd days of rain, lots of water to be affecting people. I have now Mayor Stewart.
Thank you. Actually, this is a better section for my earlier comments related to the bike reality. It looks to me like this isn't a standard no-post barrier. It's only curved on one side, and therefore my concern related to the bikes falling from one side onto the traffic lane are taken away. And I don't share the concern that Councillor Asmussen, I realize what he's going after, but I know that at some point we were discussing improving the safety of the pedestrians on the sidewalk by visibility from the cars, and by and making sure that back when there was plantings there, that there was always going to be lines of sight between the lanes of traffic and this 1 kilometer long pathway, and not allowing then that the pedestrian was out of sight from people for any length of time. And I wonder, so I'm not as concerned therefore about the height of that, about extending the height of that guard. This is I recognize that people will probably go faster than this, but this is meant to be a conventional road as far as speed limits, is it not? Is it not a 50-kilometer zone? Similar?
To the chair, it's a 50-kilometer an hour speed zone posted.
Yeah, so while I recognize that it'll be well built and therefore will undoubtedly accommodate the 70 kilometers, we don't concern ourselves with the pedestrians along Mariner and trying to put a barrier to the amount of water that might spray from there. So I'm not concerned there. My question was going to be the upward pointing lights, and I'm worried a little bit that we hear a lot about the light pollution issue, and I don't know whether lights that point upward from a sidewalk will be particularly well received long term. And I'm just trying to anticipate the kinds of questions we'll get from residents about that we have lighting that really has no use other than to look nice and make this overpass quite visible from the stars. So I wonder if that had been taken into account.
To the chair, that's a good comment. We have considered that in discussions with Public Works. We were actually planning not to propose those in the final design. It was a concept being considered, but there are some issues not only from personal lighting, but also from bridge deck integrity, water getting into deck, and other issues. It becomes a long-term maintenance problem after the fact. So I don't believe we'll be recommending that as part of the final design concept.
Yeah, I'm all for great lighting makes a great project sometimes, and this one I don't know that it's worth the effort. Thank you.
Councillor Robinson.
And I'm fine without the lighting, but I'm wondering if it could be replaced with some other visual or textural feature that would make it a pleasant walking experience.
We'll look for those opportunities in terms of giving that information from the engineering department, because this is, again, those lights were intended to be at that lookout, that crest of the overpass, to give a bit more, again, with the constraints of the project, a bit of special feel. So I guess I'm going to turn it back to Maurice, just to wrap up. Hopefully this is giving you an idea of where we're at in the design process. We've been guided by Council's resolution in terms of historic linkage. We've been constrained in a number of areas because in terms of we're trying to influence the design of this provincial project. We know that the Resident Association and the Maillardville Task Force has interest in it. We'll be meeting with them at the I think March 3rd and March 4th. I think you're going to cover this, weren't you? But sort of this is where we're at this stage in the design process. We've got, again, a limited time to work with the Kiewit and the province over the next 6 weeks, and we'll be back in front of you towards the end of March.
Thank you, Mr. Ennis. Maurice?
To the chair, I just further to my introduction, I just had a few closing remarks, some of which Mr. Ennis has already said, but we'll be meeting with Kiewit next week to finalize costs with respect to the various enhancements under consideration that we've been talking about today. And following that, we'll meet with the BD Group to obtain their input and discuss their level of available funding for these enhancements. And what we need to make clear to the committee is that we may have to prioritize some of these concepts, as there may not be sufficient funding to complete everything that we would like to see done. So we need to work through that process with the BD Group in doing that. And once we've done that, we will then meet with the Maillardville Residents Association and the task force to review the proposed concepts to be included in the bridge construction contract and report back to committee with the recommended concept for approval. And we'll take some of your comments today, and we'll see what we can do with some of those comments and see what can work in that regard. As the project is now moving along fairly quickly, we'll be reporting back, hopefully, committee in middle of March, so as to not delay the project, because now things are starting to really move in the project. And I understand the planning department and public works have been involved in this. Has been a process of costing and searching and reviewing for a year, but now we have to start to close the loop and make some decisions. So we're going to have to move quickly from here on and to get back to council so we can get a decision, so as not to hold up the contractor.
Thank you.
That concludes my comments.
One other question for Councillor Robinson.
I just have one last question. It has to do with the process. And I can appreciate the time crunch is coming and needing to get things sort of finalized. So I'm curious about what will be the role of the Maillardville Revitalization Task Force and the Residents Association, like going back to them. Is it just to say, this is the plan? Because if you're finalizing the plan and there is no opportunity for them to come back with more, then I think we need to be very clear with, this is the plan we just want to show you. This is not an opportunity for input. I don't want to set up false hopes or expectations.
Actually, through the chair, an excellent comment, and we do need to set the parameters around that, because there's, again, the city is not in the driver's seat in this one. But we need to be clear in terms of, this is the work to date, and sort of almost receive for information and awareness, as opposed to, there's not a lot of opportunities to suggest further changes.
Well, even that, there's not a lot of opportunities. Either there are opportunities or there aren't opportunities. And my suggestion is to just be really clear, because I don't want to set up expectations that we're coming back to them one more time with, here's a plan, and what feedback do you have for us, when really there's the door's closed.
It's limited.
It's done. Or that you say, we can tell you what has been done and where there's still some decisions to be made. I think we just need to be very clear about where their input is wanted, because otherwise I think this just winds up being very disappointed.
Absolutely.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Next. Clerk, next item, please.
Chief, we can just have a motion to receive this report.
Move.
Second. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Next item.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Next item, item 3, concerns a revised rate for gravel extraction. The staff recommendations that council direct staff to invite the aggregate miners to directly address this committee and or council in this matter, consult with the aggregate mining operators on a gravel extraction fee increase, utilize the criteria described within this report in recommending the fee, and review the extraction fee on a 3-year cycle utilizing criteria described within this report.
Okay, thank you very much. Do we have a mover and a seconder on this report?
I want to divide.
Well, okay, we have a
Well,
what?
sorry. I want to consider one separately.
Okay, well, do we have a seconder for one? Well,
I'll second it to discuss it.
Okay, it's moved and seconded. It's open for discussion. Councillor Reamer?
No. Sorry, everyone has hit their mics. I'll just turn all the mics back on and use the speaking list developed by the chair. If you can just give me 1 second.
Okay. Councillor Reid.
I don't know if I'm on or off or what. I was mystified when I read this, because the only thing to me that comes into this right now is number 2.
Sorry, Councillor Reid.
No, that was me by accident.
Brent, if, Mr. Chair, if I could just, I'll return the mics on.
Yeah, thank you.
Turn me on.
Good.
So, we had a meeting, and I remember Councillor McDonnell and I both trying to defer this, and the gravel operators are anxious to talk to everyone, and I know one of them wanted to talk and was told that the item was deferred and nobody can speak about it. What we thought that had happened at the last meeting, or what I thought, is that we instructed staff to consult with the mining operators and the fee increase. And whatever they want to use for their consultation or negotiation, I mean, I don't really care. The color of their trucks will be fine. But I think that that's where it ends, that staff and the two staff should get together and do it. And that's where I assumed it had been left, Mr. Chair. And I just find the rest of this is ridiculous.
So what would you like to be moved on this item here, since it's back in front of us?
I would just say move to, which is what I thought we'd already done at the last council meeting.
And I'll second that.
Okay.
But I'm not on your committee, so I can't move anything.
No, we have one member.
I'll move it.
Mr. Chair.
Just 1 second.
Mr. Suzak has had some discussions on this issue. Perhaps he could provide some context.
He's got his hand. Mr. Suzak.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Chair. If there's any confusion, it's really mine alone. Just to review what occurred at council at the last session. The originating report is attached to this report. And I'll certainly have the city clerk confirm this. My recollection is that council adopted recommendation 1, and council took no action on recommendation 2 of the originating report, which was to consult. And there was concern expressed about process. There was some nervousness about how we're going about setting this fee, and what the assumptions might be and where we're coming from. So staff took that information back, reconsidered it, and have said, well, we definitely have to talk to the aggregate miners. And we felt that it was useful for committee and council to understand where our thought process was in terms of setting a rate. The originating report discussed what the actual physical cost is to the city, 80 cents per meter. I think there was concern that that was going to be, the automatically adopted assumed rate. Where we're coming from as staff is that those are the costs, but there are other criteria also to consider in setting a rate. And that criteria, I think, mostly comes out of discussion with the aggregate miners, also understanding where the extraction rates are regionally. For example, Abbotsford is currently the highest. And we set that out in this report, and we thought it'd be a good idea to come back to council, a committee, and let you know how we're thinking about this problem. And so these recommendations are before you as a result of that thinking process.
Thank you very much. Councillor Reid, are you finished?
No, I wanted to continue what Councillor McDonnell had brought up at the last meeting and what I had agreed with. And the process was it. When we get a report like the one that was attached here that comes, and it says we recommend, 80 cents or whatever should be increased, we don't feel that, or at least Councillor McDonnell, I know because he spoke to and I did too, didn't feel that that was the right way to negotiate, that you come and then you guys go out and say, oh, well, council agrees we're going to raise this to 80 cents, and the gravel operators start from there, and it leaves a bad taste in their mouth. And trust me, they got some heavy-duty guys wading into this. So I think for that reason, we turned around and said, no, we're not going to do anything more than receive this for information. We're not going to okay 80 cents. You guys go out and consult and do your negotiations and use whatever information you have at hand. But negotiate and then come back to us with a report and see if there's what we arrive at. And that's what I thought we had done. So that's what confuses me, that it's back here. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I guess for my one, we'll go to Councillor Robinson. My one point is, I guess for council has to decide, do we want to be able to recover our costs related to that, or are we just going to look at what we're going to negotiate at this time for a fee?
We need to hear both sides of the equation.
Councillor Robinson.
So I want to echo this similar sentiments as Councillor Reid on this, mostly because the report says in 2 to consult with the aggregate mining operators on the proposed fee increases outlined in the report. And I read that as, these are the proposed fee increases, and then we're going to consult with the miners about how to implement that. And my understanding was that staff were to go and talk with these miners about this is what it costs, what is reasonable, what is fair, what makes sense, what's appropriate, and then come back to council with some recommendations and what it could look like, not the other way around. So my understanding is that what council is asking is that this report get discussed with the mining operators, gather info from them about what's appropriate, what their concerns are in terms of how to implement fee increases, what would be fair and reasonable, then make the recommendation back to the committee after consultation with them. And I'm not comfortable, until that happens, I don't see why we would invite the aggregate miners to even talk with us. I think that there's still some work here for staff to do, so.
Okay. We have 4 items here. Do we want to move each one, have them separated and vote on each one? Do we have one separation for each item?
Mr. Chair, there's a motion on the floor that's only recommendation 1 that opened the discussion. That was moved by me. I'm actually opposed to it. I don't think that, as Councillor Robinson said, we'll need to vote on it, I suspect.
Yep, we'll need to vote on it then.
A motion may be withdrawn with the consent of the mover and the seconder.
Okay, I'll withdraw the motion.
Fine with me.
Okay, and then move number 2, 3, and 4 altogether.
Okay, you move that, Mayor Stewart? Do you have a seconder to that?
Actually, I wanted one edit of item number 2, and it would read: consult with the aggregate mining operators on an appropriate gravel extraction fee. I don't even think we need to even presuppose that it will go up, but I suspect it will. But what we're looking at is what's the appropriate fee.
Thank you. And that's your motion?
That's my motion.
Do we have a seconder to that?
I'll second, but I want to make an amendment as well.
Okay.
Okay. We have 2 other people here.
I'm just filling in for the absent member.
Councillor Reamer.
Well, I wanted you to make an amendment too, Selena.
Okay, what's the amendment, please?
To consult with the aggregate mining operators on an appropriate gravel extraction fee increase and report back to council
Yes.
the results of that.
I know, that's what I wanted.
Yeah,
okay, is that suitable to the mover of the motion?
Yes. Well,
Mr. Clerk, do you have that?
I do have that, yes. If this is acceptable to the original mover,
there we go.
It could save a step in the process.
That's a better motion.
Everybody understands the motion. Is there any further discussion on this one? For number 2, seeing none. On voting on 2, 3, and 4, all those in favor? Opposed? Carried.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Moving on to item 4 then. This concerns a local area service. It's at Surf Crescent and Tide Place. The staff recommendations that council directs staff to formally petition the residents of Surf Crescent and Tide Place regarding the installation of concrete curb and gutter on each street.
Do we have a mover or a seconder for this item, please?
I'll move it, although I have to declare I live on the street, but I will not benefit. I have a sidewalk already. Personally.
That's your decision if you feel you're in a conflict or not. That's what
I don't think I'm in a conflict.
That's your own decision.
Well, you know what? Maybe I should remove myself. When in doubt, remove yourself.
Unfortunately, staff can't provide direction on that.
I only want clarification. The fee, the 10% wouldn't apply to you.
Doesn't apply to me.
And nothing. Yeah,
I don't think
there's nothing, right? I just need a bit of a consultation from my colleagues here.
Well,
no, we're good. Okay, I'm good. I'll stay.
Okay. So, we have a mover and seconder to this item, please.
Move it.
Seconded.
Second. Discussion. Seeing none. All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you.
That is the last formal item on this agenda.
Move adjournment.
Move it.
Second.
All those in favor? Opposed? Carried. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.